Over the past few months, I've been finding that my journaling style is tending towards the more simplistic. I still want it to be decorative, but I don't want to put in too much effort to make it so. For this bullet journal setup, we are going with a dragons theme, but rather than try and draw the dragons myself, I'm using this tape from the washi tape shop. It is absolutely beautiful, pretty much like all of their tapes, but I love the gold. I think that the designs are so fun. The tapes themselves are super wide, so either make for really good page runners, like down the side of a page, or you can cut out individual elements and use them as smaller decorations. That's kind of what I've done on our cover page here, so cut out one of the dragon designs and a couple of the elements around it, and just stuck that straight down in the middle of the page. Now, when it comes to my cover pages, typically I would make them not super functional pages. They'd really just be there as kind of like a flag to say, hey, this is the start of a new month. But over the last few months, I've been trying to find ways to kind of pair this with something that's a little bit more functional, whether that be a monthly calendar or some kind of checklist. I haven't quite found something that works, so this time we are again changing it up, and I'm making this into kind of a dashboard page. For this one, I'm drawing 4 separate boxes in each of the page corners, and wherever they start to approach the dragon, I'm just stopping the line work. Each of these boxes is going to be filled with a different type of checklist, so one for anything I'm doing for work, one for home-related tasks, one that is for personal tasks, and another one for anything that's coming up in the next month. Or for me, really, that's the next cycle or 4-week period. As said, the washi tape that I'm using here makes the page setup super simple. This one really only took me about 5 to 6 minutes, and it probably only takes that long because I like to be quite careful with my line work, and this pen was technically running out when I was using it. So I had to go a little bit slower to make sure that the black lines were still kind of consistent in terms of their thickness and the amount of black that they were putting down. One of the ways that I've started considering my bullet journal collections is what kind of pages they are in terms of when I use them. Like, are they the kind of page that I set up at the start of a period and then completely populate? Or are they the kind of pages that get filled in as I work through a period of time? In terms of this dashboard page, I'm kind of thinking it'll end up being a combination of both, so jotting down some projects that I have in different areas at the start of the month, and then as we go through the month, I'll be adding to it as I complete new projects or undertake new work. On the other hand, comparing that to the page that we're going to have on the left, that's going to be my actions log, and this one very much is going to be the kind of page that gets completely set up at the start of the month, so completely filling in all of the actions that I want to take to work on my goals. I find that having the actions page completely populated before the month starts is the best way to make sure that things actually get done, and I'm going to be using the remaining few days before April starts to make sure that everything is filled in there. In terms of the decoration on the actions log though, I wanted to use more of that dragon washi tape, but using it to effectively make a banner up the left-hand side of the page. While I could have just used the tape as it was and just slapped it down, going from the bottom to the top, I decided to be a little bit persnickety with which dragon was featured in which spot, so I ended up cutting out one dragon design and sticking that to the bottom of the page, and then finding the tail end of another to stick above that. For the extra space that didn't really have any decoration in it, I then went and kind of fussy cut around individual elements and stuck it into those gaps. You don't have to do this, it certainly adds to the time taken, but I was just feeling a little bit particular with which elements I wanted in that space. If you wanted to grab yourself something from the washi tape shop, whether it be this tape or any of their other designs, you can of course use code JASHII10 at checkout for 10% off if you want to, because we love savings. If you're more interested in the scissors that I'm using though, which by the way are excellent scissors, those ones are also linked in the description box, along with any other materials that I used in the setup. When it came to deciding on a color palette for this setup, in particular with regards to any of the other elements that weren't the tape, this is where things could have taken multiple different turns. Notably in the tapes themselves, we have a range of different colors. In this one, primarily orange, but in some of the other tapes that I used, we also have a lot of green, and also some red and blue tones. Rather than effectively turning everything into a rainbow pick and mix, I decided to keep the majority of my other materials to just black, so black line work, black headings, and then I also wanted to make sure that I had a dot marker to accompany these. I love using the dot markers. I did not think when I first got them that I was going to use them as much as I do, but now they are definitely a staple supply for me. But in picking those, I wanted to have a color that kind of matched at least something from the tape without being too overpowering itself. If you're ever wondering which supply you might want to use, then a very good solution is making yourself a little swatch page and comparing it to the materials you're already using. For this, I just used an offcut that I have from, I don't know, a Dutch door or something similar, but making sure that it was the same paper type as what I'm working on in my journal. It's all good and well to put it on just any random piece of paper, but if the paper type isn't the same as what you're actually using, then the colors can show up a little bit differently. Once I'd selected some materials though and put them down on that little piece of paper, I could then compare it to the tape that's already on the page and see which one fits the best. I ended up going with a pale yellow color, mainly because I think it complemented the yellow elements that we have in the tape already. Before we get into the next layout in the setup though, we're just gonna have a flip back and see how this cycle was going. For cycle 3, or what was March for most people, we went with a butterflies theme and I loved this setup. I thought that the decorative elements was so super fun, and there were enough butterflies in the little pack of stickers that I was using to decorate the entire month and then some. I did have a couple butterflies left over at the end, so I just stuck them in random places. But after having such a struggle in cycle 2 or February to actually get in and use my journal, this was really nice. I know in part that was because of the decorative elements and just having some enjoyment related to those, which is why even though I'm tending towards a more simplistic style, I still want to keep decoration in my journal. At the end of that cycle, we do have reset week because it'll be the end of quarter 1, and after that I've got the pages that I set up for quarter 2, which we have a separate video on. In terms of my April setup though, the next layout we're putting in is a monthly log, or what is kind of a monthly log. It's only 4 weeks. So I've actually just been calling it a cyclic overview. I want to have heaps of space to write in this one, so I have 4 columns on the left-hand page and 3 on the right, so 1 for each day of the week, and then I separate those into 4 rows for those 4 weeks. Any of the other space outside of the grid is going to be used for decoration, again just using the tapes. But rather than going with the dragon tape in particular, the set actually came with a phoenix tape as well, so I thought to have a little bit of variation between the pages, I'd include that one here. That phoenix panel is going to go down the right hand side, but along the top I'm putting in the other tape in the set, which is more just kind of a decorative repeating pattern, but the colours and the decorative style match the other tapes nicely. This is also the tape that I think I might incorporate into my daily logging, just for a little bit of visual interest, but that's just the idea at the moment. We'll see what actually happens when I get to it. Coming back to that idea of when do my collections actually get used or populated, this one is very much one that gets populated at the start and not so much throughout. The aim for this one isn't necessarily to have the most up-to-date information or accurate record of what happens, but more so just a space to plan out what I think is going to be happening. So putting in things like my events, my content releases, all of that kind of stuff, so that at the start of the cycle I have a really good idea of when things are happening, when things are due, and thus when I need to work on what. I find that my consistency with actually going back to any kind of monthly log or page like this is very low, so rather than having yet another month where I put pressure on myself to come back and fill this in, I'm trying to lean a little bit more into how I naturally tend to use it, which is a little bit more of a planning space done in advance, rather than a space that I come and check back in on again and again. I still find the act of getting in here and scaffolding out when things are going to happen to be useful, so to me it's kind of okay if it doesn't get accurately updated as the cycle progresses. I would love to know if you have a similar pain point when it comes to your monthly log. Do you find that you set it up and then don't really come back and refer to it or use it? Or are you like super consistent with your monthly log? Let me know in the comments. Changing up my black pen so hopefully this process goes smoother, we are now onto my work outputs layout. This one actually spans multiple spreads because I have a lot of work outputs, funnily enough. But the page that we have on the left hand side is effectively an overview for a 5-week period for the content that I put out. I like to make this 5 weeks rather than just 4 because it's always good to plan ahead. And then the subsequent pages are more specifics about getting that content out, whether that be content for YouTube, for our team memberships, photo posts, the podcast, whatever else. In terms of the overview though, we have a row for each of the days of the 5-week period, and then a column for each of the different types of content. While in my first iteration of this layout, I had 5 columns. I decided to scrap reels because I just haven't really been all that inclined to make them. Short form video, or more specifically vertical short form video, isn't really my favorite type of content, and I have been finding my focus a little bit split at the moment with trying to incorporate those as well, so I decided to take them out of the mix. If they happen, that's great, but it isn't a priority. But that means that the 4 columns I have are for photo posts, text, videos, and then other. The other section is mainly for the team membership perks, and videos, funnily enough, are mainly for YouTube, whereas photos and text kind of go in a variety of places. photos mainly being for Instagram and text mostly being for like the community tab and stuff. But I found that splitting it between different types of content rather than different platforms that I'm posting on has just been a little bit more helpful for me, mainly because the type of work for the type of content is a little bit different. The page on the right though is going to be one of those first kind of planning pages, and the two boxes that I have here are for videos at the top and membership perks at the bottom. Each of these is set up using the Alastair method, so on the left hand side of each box I list out what the piece of content is, and then the columns on the very right hand side of the box represent different things that I need to do in working on those pieces. For instance, for videos that could be something like idea generation, making sure the materials are prepared, doing the filming, doing the editing, making a thumbnail, then the uploading process, the scheduling process, and then actually having it published. For memberships, we also have idea generation, we have the uploading of the materials once they're prepared, then we have copywriting, or writing out the text for any posts, and then posting that those are available in all of the different places. I found this has worked quite well for me so far, or at least, it's worked well for me this cycle because it's the first kind of iteration of using it, so I'm hoping that it's going to be helpful for April as well. As said though, this layout does span multiple pages, so along the right hand side I've actually cut away the page to make a Dutch door. This meant that I could see the decoration panel from both sides of the Dutch door, but in cutting the page down I made it so that it cuts at the same place that the photos column finishes. That means that on the other side, or the next spread, the section that I'm going to have on that left-hand page will be for the photos in particular. I figured it kind of pays to have the schedule of when the photos are getting posted, which was on the first layout, right next to the things I need to do in making those photo posts. While it does look maybe a little bit odd having two photos headers right next to each other when we have the page open like we do here, what I think is more important is having things labeled appropriately and having that information laid out in a way that's going to be most useful when I come to use it. In terms of the photo box though, that one is again set up with the Alastair method, so a description of what the photo is along the left, and then columns on the right hand side of that box for idea generation, material prep, taking the picture, doing any kind of color editing, writing the caption, and then posting it in the places that I need to post it. On the right hand side of the layout though, this is where all of my planning for the podcast is going, and rather than doing this one in an Alastair method, which I could have done, but it would have ended up not taking up very much space. Not to say that I was specifically aiming to take up space with this, but I just wanted to utilize the page in full, so I have a separate box for each of the podcast episodes, and then inside of those boxes I can write out any of the things I need to do in preparing those episodes. The podcast has been a total highlight for this first quarter of the year, and I'm really glad that Mark reached out and asked me if I wanted to do it. If you haven't checked out the Planner Pals podcast, as the name kind of suggests, it's about planning with pals. So if you would like to be our planner pal, if you want to check out the podcast, it is linked in the description box. So far we have 4 episodes out, our most recent one being about fountain pens, and even though I am not a fan of fountain pens, Mark very much is, just listening to him talk about it and the amount of enthusiasm he has for it has me very much considering getting a fountain pen. That episode was a lot of fun though, and the whole thing has been a lot of fun, so do make sure to check it out. But now we're onto a page that I haven't had in my monthly/cyclic setups in a little while, and that is a reflections page. For the first quarter of the year, I was doing my reflections all on one spread, so each cycle coming back to that spread to do my reflection. But I really missed having it as part of this kind of monthly setup, so I've tweaked it a little bit for quarter 2, brought it back into the cyclic setup, so that I have just the reflection from this cycle on this page. Going with the idea of alternating my decoration, we're doing the phoenixes on that one, and then the dragon on the next. But I've got a bunch of different boxes on this reflection page that I can use for different types of reflection. So reflecting on wins, on challenges, on things that maybe I want to improve, or any lessons that I learned. I'll also probably have some space to write down things I did or didn't like in my journal to make sure that in my next setup I'm considering those things, but I don't go and actually put in titles at this stage. I want to think about it a little bit more before I go and label them. The page on the right is going to be for notes though, so just any thoughts or musings that I have as we go throughout the cycle, and I'm leaving that one pretty open apart from some corner decoration and the header. I love how easy the decoration was in this setup because of the tape, and I'm excited to continue using it throughout my fortnightly and daily setups. I think I'll probably be relying pretty heavily on that thinner decorative tape, but it also would be nice to bring a couple of those larger elements in with the dragons and the phoenixes. There's only a couple of days until April starts though, so I need to make sure that I get in and populate all of these layouts. But if you are still on the hunt for April journal inspiration, then this playlist here is the next one to check out. That one contains all of my previous April setups, including last year's setup, which was an alien abduction theme, which was a lot of fun. That one's worth checking out though, so click or tap on that one and I'll see you over there.